Welcome to the YouTube replay of Green Drinks September Spotlight on Smart Cities. For this edition, we welcomed 4 experts to tell us about the work they are doing to reshape our cities. We welcomed Evelyne Chevry from Luminary AI, Hugh O'Reilly from Innovate Cities, Tonja Leach from Quest Canada, and Alain Miguelez from the City of Ottawa. Enjoy this replay.
Everybody, and welcome. So I think we're almost into our 6th month of doing green drinks on Zoom due to the COVID-19. So it's quite a different experience, but it's fantastic because we've been able to open up the attendance to anybody in the world. And actually tonight we've got, of course, all of our Ottawa participants, and then we have guests from Arnprior, Bowmanville, Carp, Churchill, Manitoba, Halifax, Los Altos, Berlin, Germany, Marrickville, Montreal, Oakville, Oshawa, Sarasota, Florida, Scarborough, and Somerstown, including Toronto and Truro, Nova Scotia. So it's nice to see that other people across Canada and the rest of the world are coming on and coming to learn what's happening in our neck of the woods. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Raymond Demierre, and along with my colleague Nick Hebb, we are both with SmartNet Alliance. The Alliance is a group of businesses and organizations who collaborate on projects and initiatives to accelerate Canada's transition to a sustainable economy. For more information on SNA, you can consult our website at www.smartnetalliance.ca, and Nick will put that in the chat box also. You'll be able to find out more about our members. We have a whole page on our members, and we've launched some business courses recently that are up there in our resources section. And if you want to apply to become a member, you can go to the membership page, and we've got our categories listed there. So for those of you who are not familiar with Green Drinks, this is an international event that happens once a month in about 500 countries. There are about 20 chapters in Ontario, and it has existed in Ottawa for over 10 years. For the past 5 years, SmartNet Alliance has been hosting the event. And when it was in person, we were at the Fox and the Feather on Elgin, and now we're on Zoom, so all is good. We are, again, a reminder, we are recording tonight's session, and we'll be posting it on YouTube within the next 10 days. So if you prefer, you can turn your video off. If you want to watch other green drinks, we'll be putting it up on the YouTube channel. Nick will put the link in the chat box. And after tonight's presentation, we will have a Q&A with the speakers. So if you have any questions, as Nick mentioned, just put them in the chat box. We'll be collecting them, and then we'll go through them at the end. So tonight we are focusing on smart cities. We have 4 guest speakers. They are 1, Evelyne Chevry from Luminary AI, Hugh O'Reilly from Innovate Cities, Tonja Leach from Quest Canada, and Alain Miguelez from the City of Ottawa. In a moment, Nick will introduce each speaker individually before they start their presentation. So again, quick reminder, questions in the chat box, turn your video off if you don't want to be on, and we'll continue from there. Nick, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ramon, and thanks everybody for jumping in. Looks like a great crowd, and big thanks to our speakers today to be able to take us through smart cities and what they mean. And yeah, if you do have any questions, just throw them into chat. Some of the speakers will try to clear some of the questions as we're going through on chat there. And at the end, we can sort of tackle anything we haven't hit in chat, and also do a little bit of a discussion at the end. So our first speaker is Evelyne Chevry, and she's a strategist, futurist, serial entrepreneur, and impact technology advocate. Her focus is on helping organizations to integrate sustainable development goals in their process. Consultant in artificial intelligence, CTO at Ninus, and founder of Luminary AI. She helps making large amounts of data understandable by decision makers. So we're super happy to have her here. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the international projects and do a little bit of an intro to smart cities for anybody who maybe not familiar as much with them. So over to you, Evelyne, to share your screen and take us away.
Thank you, Nick, for the nice introduction. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yeah, all good to go.
Start the presentation.
And thanks so much for joining us all the way from Montreal.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yep, you're good to go. There we go. You've got your...
So what we'll do, I'll try to be a bit out of the box in the process of the presentation. We'll cover a kind of roadmap of what is a sustainable smart city and what it may look like, the what it is, why we need sustainable smart cities and how to do it. I like this picture that we see in the background because it kind of reflects the state we are in at the moment regarding smart cities and sustainability. You see that the image is a bit rough, and the plants that we see are a bit encaged. And it's where we are now is that we're at the place where we're looking at how to expand. So let's start this. Can you see the next slide? Yes. So what is a smart city? There's so many definitions and there's so many perceptions around the world that mainly it's what we decide to. So what we'll go through what some of the possibilities of what is a smart city. So you see that image in the background, it's really built out of, it's a computer. It's not a smart city, but it looks like a smart city. And that's the image that seems to be being vehiculated a lot. It's related to AI, to data, and how to aggregate data, connect the city together. And it's steps that we need to do. But I would not like to live in that computer or in a world where we feel that we're too much inside a computer or inside, like there's no plant, there's no animal, there's no life. And that's mainly the challenge we have, is that the history of smart city has been evolving around data, which is awesome. We're getting a lot of data these days, and we need to do something about it. But we don't want to stay in that state of just focusing on data and technology. So what I'll try to do is to give a perspective of other angles that are not related to simply automation or data and connection. So what are the components of a smart city? There's, like you can see in that background image, there's probably millions of items right over there, right? And that's what we see in a city. There's smart devices everywhere that we start to put in place. By 2025, if I recall correctly, there's around 3 trillion smart devices that will be connected around the world, right? So we have major device and connection, but it's not just that. Like part of the component are smart people. We need people to be able to make proper decision and being educated and have a level of capacity of understanding the world they live in and being able to interact with the world we live in. And the world is moving really fast at the moment. So we need that level of smartness. There's also smart infrastructure, smart services, economy, and the list goes long, right? Like we cannot even list what are all the components of our smart city. And that's one of the challenges we will discuss a bit later. So what is smart? Is it intelligence? Is it automation? Is it decision making? Is it AI? Like most AI are really done. Like I've been in the field for years. It's awesome what you can do, but it's also dumb. It's not intelligent. Like most AI at the moment, what they can do is execute what as a human we can do in 1 second of thought. So it's really short in kind of capacity. There's new technology coming, like OpenAI just released a few weeks ago their latest model that I think just the training cost 4.7 million to train the model, but it's efficient to write really impressive piece of text and content, but it's not intelligent enough to make decision for us or on our behalf. So we need to find what's the less. So it's mostly us. It's not the technology. It's mostly us as human, what we can do with the smart city and how can we empower ourselves to be smarter in our decision making and in our own intelligence and using AI for it, right? How? So yes, sure, we need data, device, technology, automation, product. Maybe it's a part of it, but there's something else that we will cover a bit later in the presentation. And Nick, keep me on that clock because I can expand for hours. So I'll just like remind me like maybe 5 minutes before the end.
Absolutely, and we'll have a bit of time at the end to dig a bit deeper with the discussion as well.
So one example of challenge that relate to smart city is a supply chain, and that's just one example. To kind of feed a city or to support a city in all its needs, we need external resources. We need even internal moving internal resources, and that supply chain we need to take into account. Yes, cost, energy, distance, all the list there here, and the list goes on. It's huge. And so as a human, it's really hard to tackle this. And there's a bit of complexity in how to build something that we can make proper decision in the world we live in at the moment. So when we think about smart city, there's other external components that are not related to cost and that are not related to data, right? Or that are not related to all the tech and all more the logistic, but also the geopolitics around it, the economic, the cultural, social, and the science. So it may feel really overwhelming at some time. I'll give you an example. Just a project we've been working with a different partner is a different call center during COVID. And the different call center from Service Canada, from Revenu Québec and other places, the agent on the phone, when they receive a call for business purpose, like how much a grant will be allocated for, let's say, restaurant, right? And someone's calling for its restaurant. But the agent on the phone will spend maybe 10 minutes on the grant itself, but will spend another 20 to 40 minutes to emotionally support the caller, because we were in a crisis and we're still are. So there's much more than what we plan. And whenever we plan something, what we're seeing around smart city is that whatever we plan, it's much bigger and complex than what we think. So the reality check is that it's complex, and it's not only complex, it's a lot of the data is not available. We're still at many places working on pen and paper, and that's good. I love pen and paper. I play with it on a daily basis, but that's a challenge because there's a lot of things that are not adapted to the digital world. and how we're not letting away. So when we think about supply chain that we were talking a bit earlier, most of the supply chain, Apple on people are calling, they have a list of phone call of supplier and it's just phone. And usually it's in a software, but it's not shared between all the supplier. So just tracing a container that has been lost can take months, and sometimes they get lost forever, or for years. So that's all that challenge is of migrating to the digital world required the kind of design thinking and design process of analyzing, I think really clearly mapping what's happening in a specific niche, a specific industry. So when we think about smart city, we really need to be specific. Are we talking about redesigning the street? Are we talking about the supply of fruit? So we need to go on the specific and list all the supplier and the group that are involved and see how we can create a proper synergy around it. So that kind of synergy, it's for one small challenge that we're trying to solve. Let's say, by example, just the supply of fruit. But when we want to take into account a bigger perspective, like the sustainable development goal, then we end up with much more. So we're even adding more to the complexity we had before, right? So we had to go back, we had the data, the technology, the automation, yes. Then we have all the logistic, then we have all the complexity, and then we have the fact that not everything is ready to be used. And then we have also to include all these factors in building a proper sustainable city. So you see right here the goal number 11, the sustainable city. It's one goal, but as a city representative or even an entrepreneur or a corporation, when we think about smart city, we cannot just think about the number 11. We need to think about all these other elements. So that's a lot of elements that we need to take into account. So how do we do that? The fourth sector is really something that is emerging, has been emerging for a decade, 2 decades around that. But it starts to take root right now in different countries. So it's the emerging field around the public sector, the private sector, and social sector. And what's great about it, it's more organic. It doesn't need structure. So I'll give you a few examples of projects that have emerged in the fourth sector around city. It's not even yet smart city, but close to city. So one example is in Montreal. It's the largest green garden rooftop in the world. And at the moment it can feed around 2% of Montreal city. So that's one example of project that is more from the corporation side. So if we think about the fourth sector, it comes from the private sector, but we benefit much more than just generating revenue. So it reduces the carbon footprint because we don't have to have ice trucks and transportation, but it also facilitates access and adaptability of a current situation. So that's one use case from the I would say, the corporate sector. If we think about a use case that is more organic from the public and civil sector, mostly civil sector, in the city of Lachine, one project that emerged was a group of people that were making jogging on an everyday basis. They start to pick up all the cigarette remaining while they were running, and they started to post the places where there were more cigarettes on Facebook, and it happened that someone took that and made a Facebook group of Let's Clean Lachine street of cigarette remaining. And in a matter of weeks, a lot of people started to participate. The challenge in that space, in that fact, is that how can it really emerged fast and quickly, but it was not captured. So the city of Lachine started to work. They have been made aware of this group starting to clean the city, and they had the flexibility to allocate a bit of fund to support the initiative. So that financing flexibility is something that seems to be really critical when we think about the effort that people are doing. So there's no technology involved in that, but it's still smart, but it's on the people side, right? So I'm going a bit fast because I haven't tracked the time.
So got a couple minutes there left there, Evelyne?
Yes, okay. So one other use case is in the city of Gibraltar. The city had really a big challenge because they're in a geopolitical situation where they cannot control their surrounding. They really can control, like, it's around 50,000 citizens, right? But it's a country, but it's not a country, but it's a kind of city-state. And they had to find their own way to support SDG initiative, because it could not come from EU. It needed to come from UK, but UK had other interests. So they needed to come with their own. So they made a SDG award. And what happened is that the citizens started to have their own initiative to kind of build the surrounding of the city that was degrading. So all the surrounding of the city was degrading. There was a lot of pollution, and they started to clean the surrounding of the city, and they were able to have funding to support their initiative. So that funding part it's really critical, and it's funding on initiatives that do not have a status. It's not an NGO. It's not an organization. It's not a corporation. It's just a group of people that want to do things, and they don't want to usually to take the responsibility of the administration, paperwork. So this award was a way to support this group while entertaining a vision. So all these example was to go a bit into detail, but what's important is that the interconnectivity in the network, that all these projects of smart people, smart infrastructure, when we start to connect them together, this is where things start to be really the smart part. When we stay in our own project, it's smart, but it becomes smarter when we connect. But it's a big information overload to connect all these. So how we do that? We build proper awareness. And that awareness is something that we need to stay aware that it's complex, it's heavy, and there's ways to facilitate that. So, so one way is AI, but the importance of AI, it's not the technology itself. Deep learning is a technology, but AI, it's just connecting different intelligence systems. And the human and communities and collectivities are intelligence system that if we connect together, we can connect it with deep learning technologies. But all that intelligence that we're structuring is what will bring the right step. So what we need to do so is not technology per se. We have a lot of technology available, and I've been playing for a decade in AI, and there's plenty, but what we need more, it's not the tech, it's the community and the leadership. So
it's how we use those tools, right, Evelyne? So
yes,
true. So
exactly.
true. I think the example there from your hometown in Montreal is really quite prevalent because it's to do with food, right?
Yes.
And we're really going to see, you know, where we can put all this data to use when we look at, you know, how we're going to feed ourselves in the next, you know, 100 years moving forward, because there's going to be a bunch more scarcity, right? So,
yes,
you know, how can we decrease the waste and increase the productivity? So I think it's so powerful, the examples that you talked about. Thanks so much. We'll maybe go a little deeper after the presentations, if you can stick around a little bit. Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation.
It was a pleasure.
Great,
So,
some great.
The last thing.
Sure.
To do so, the key is governance. So we need community, but the biggest challenge around community is governance. It's how we're making decisions as groups, our communities, as people. And I think that's the biggest challenge we need to tackle. There's community, but the governance is something that we're still in infancy on how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the sidewalk labs really illustrated that, right? It's sort of,
exactly.
You know, a lot of the city was sort of out of its depth with like, okay, you know, Google wants to come and do all this thing in your city. You'd be crazy to say no, but if you dig a bit deeper, it may not be the best thing after all. So well, that's an interesting example. And I think that leads really well into to our next speaker with bring out Hugh. Thanks so much again, Evelyne, for a great chat. Hopefully you can stick around and go a little bit deeper. Now I want to bring in Hugh O'Reilly, and he's the Executive Director over at Innovative Cities. And he's going to talk a little bit about what's going on with all this raw data, right? Because as we heard from Evelyne, there's so much, there's more than we can understand. And you know, I think it's, like she says, it's all about the governance and what we do with that. So Innovate Cities is a nonprofit Canadian-led network of innovators. They bring together industry leaders and innovators to accelerate new technologies applied to the urban environment in a manner that protects data, privacy, and security. They are creating Community Hub, which is a cloud-based platform, as well as launching Community Works, a series of programmings. So I don't want to give all the secret sauce from Hugh away. So let's bring in Hugh O'Reilly. Thanks so much, Hugh, for joining us. And you can.
Thank you very much, Nick. I really, and thank you everyone who's here for Green Drinks. I will, Nick promised me, he enticed me to do this because he said next time I'm in Ottawa, he would take me to Colonnade for a pizza. So I'm gonna hold you to that, Nick.
Absolutely.
So my presentation is gonna focus on a few things. First of all, I want to introduce everyone to what Innovate Cities is. I want to describe what we're doing in terms of trying to bring technology to the built urban environment. I want to also I will then speak to what our 3 key initiatives are. Well, there's actually 4. One is a data trust. Then we have what we call City Stack, City Sphere, and City Space. And I'm really interested in getting reactions to what we're proposing in terms of developing a marketplace. I think the comments Nick made with respect to sidewalk labs are important, because some of the initiatives we're undertaking at Innovate Cities are aimed at avoiding some of the issues that sidewalk labs confronted. So let's begin. Of course, now if I can get the slides. Oh, wait a minute. Kind of funny that I'm an executive director of Innovate Cities and I have trouble with the PowerPoint, but I guess, that's how the world works. First and foremost, Innovate Cities is a Canadian not-for-profit. We are a member-based organization. We're based in Southern Ontario. We have received some funding from FedDev, and we have certain founding technology partners. Our mission is to advance the development and commercialization of smart cities innovation. We want, and also there's a big Canadian component to this. We want to make sure that we position Canada as a leader in smart cities. And we also want to make sure that the manner in which we do this respects the privacy of the people who live in the cities, residents, users of the buildings, and also no one entity will be able to monopolize the data that's held in our data trust. Data, as you would all know, is the fundamental building block of innovation. And while we're promoting commercialization of data, we want to make sure that everyone has equal access to it. So now I know we have some civic leaders here, but the built environment is not often prioritized in civic agendas, but buildings are a critical element of the urban landscape. We also want to make sure that that technology is used in a way where we're not siloed, where we borrow from each other's ideas and we move forward. And then in terms of innovation, the market lacks capacity in the sense of we have all sorts of things that inhibit the ability of our innovators to scale up. This Innovate Cities is about creating. Sorry, sometimes when I get talking, I reflect my prairie heritage and I start dropping my G's. So, which can be sometimes it doesn't translate well. But when we look at Innovate Cities, what we're aiming for is a made in Canada ecosystem, and we really have three fundamental elements to what we're doing, which I'll get into in some greater detail in the presentation as it goes along. First of all, we have City Stack, and we have a fundamental base technology that can make any building smart. And what we want to be able to do is to make sure that the operations of the building enhance the experience that individuals have in the building. We also want to integrate with so-called outside services by using technology properly. And we're also launching 2 products in the near future built off our AI platform, which is, one is a COVID-19 product that we're calling Safe Space, which will allow for a return to work in a way that helps people deal with the threat that COVID-19 is. And I'll talk the use cases on that a little bit more. Our second, and we currently, by the way, have a call for innovators out on our COVID Safe Space product. So if there's anyone in the audience who has a product that they think could enhance what we're offering, we're all ears and would love to hear from you. Our next application is going to be a climate resilience and adaptation product. And then of course, I've mentioned our data trust. CitySphere is our innovator ecosystem, where we want to identify, vet, and integrate innovators. I also want to be clear, any innovator that participates in the Innovate Cities platform or ecosystem will continue to control and own their own IP. We're working with others around creating a patent collective, but we want the innovators who work with us to prosper. The other thing I would say in terms of our application is we're not looking for exclusive relationships. So if we come together and we bid on an activity for a particular landlord or building, we'll work together on that one. But if the innovator goes and bids with a different building or a different developer or a different tenant, we want them to do well. We want to partner with innovation hubs, government investors, corporate players. And we also, we want to assist with R&D infrastructure, access to customers, and promote continuous innovation. The last element of this is what we're calling our digital marketplace. It's going to be like, in a sense, a mall. So the first store in this mall will be our safe space product. We want to bring innovators and customers together. And we want to, in so doing, we want to also build on various themes. So if we think about this as a mall, the first store in our mall is going to be the COVID Safe Space store. The next one will be climate resilience, and so on. We also think a benefit of this is it will assist innovators in fundraising, because they'll be able to demonstrate. Now, I used to run a major pension fund. Investors have limited ways in terms of they value things. The difficulty they have in the innovation space is they're used to valuing tangible items. Intangible becomes more difficult, but we help on the tangible aspect insofar as innovators will be able to demonstrate that they have customers and revenues, and investors like that. Here's our City Stack tech platform, and it shows you how we want to build on top of our platform and to improve functionality, to create targeted innovation, and to create targeted activities in the built environment. This is a little more of a slide that goes over our innovation ecosystem, and it explains the benefits for innovators, incubators, and associations, as well as customers. We want to accelerate R&D with proven and patented capabilities. We want to help innovators get access to customers. We want to ultimately build global networks, and we want to we also want to make sure that there are services to support the innovation community in terms of intellectual property support, data trust, thought leadership, those kind of issues. For incubators and associations, we see this as adding on to them, not as a threat to them, but to adding on and improving their offerings. And we see this as the next step for startups. And then for customers, it has obvious value propositions, which are outlined there, but included in these value propositions is right now we have innovation officers in various organizations. And we believe that this marketplace will make their jobs easier and make them more, just make it easier for them to access proven technologies. This is something that I'm quite passionate about. So if I start, like if my face turns red as I'm talking about this, that's why. But the issue is, and I was on the TMX Advancing Innovation Roundtable. Canada is the second most successful country in the world when it comes to startups. And where we fail is on scaling up. And one of the things that our marketplace is aimed at is removing the obstacles to scaling up to help make that easier for innovators. Ultimately, I would like us to lead the way so we create an environment where innovators spend a lot less time on trying to raise money and a lot more time on doing what they do best, which is building out innovation. When we look at prop tech, it's really, really crowded. And we want to make sure that we can act. It's more than a curator. We can act to vet what is appropriate technology. We can help the customers. We can help the innovators. And we can bring technology to bear that is user-friendly and also make sure that we maximize innovation potential. Here's our digital marketplace. And this sets out our mall. So here are the first few products. There'll be the Return to Work Safe Space product, which I'm going to get into a little bit more. I'm also timing myself, Nick. I think I'm doing okay. Then climate resilience and adaptation, safety and emergency response. We're also in the process of setting up a disability advisory committee because after it was announced that I was the executive director, I was very fortunate. David Onley, who's our former lieutenant governor in Ontario, and a disability advocate reached out to me. So we will be looking at setting up a disability advisory committee so that we can make sure that it's an inclusive vision we have. And these are the advantages we see for both innovators and buyers, making the marketplace more understandable and simpler to use. Here's the kind of journey that we see this going on for both innovators and buyers. And we think that this is, what we're really hoping is by setting it up this way, we can put market forces to work to help pick winners in the innovation sector, help expand and help improve the situation of Canadian innovators. Here's our COVID return to work product. This will be shortly launched. It's likely going to be launched, I'm thinking by the end of the month. And it's going to have, it has 6 use cases that you can see here, which include contact tracing, physical distancing, sanitation and housekeeping, finding safe things, if you will, visitors and appointments, contactless entry, and environmental control. Right now, all of the materials that we're proposing for this, all of the technology is made in Ontario. We're going to host this on a Canadian cloud infrastructure. It's going to be our first example of our data trust. And this is ready to deploy. We have a call for innovators out. If there's anybody in the audience, I hope you don't mind me soliciting. If Nick mutes me for soliciting, you'll now know why. But if there's anyone in the audience who's interested in what we're doing, either as wanting to procure the product or alternatively to participate and to add to the use cases, we would be very much interested in that. So we're the City Hub, which is really all of the elements that are contained in Cityscape, City Sphere, and City Space. We see this as promoting economic development in terms of job creation, and that not just, I mean, STEM jobs are important, but these are also, if we can focus on the built environment, these are also jobs for tradespeople and in improving our environment so we can get back to work. We also see this as having a commercial growth impact. We can accelerate research and development, create access to customers, test what we're doing in real world settings, and we think we can improve access to venture capital. I think recognition, talent, and investment is another area. And then we can also think that this can form a key element with respect to training and upskilling programs, education and digital transformation advisory. We think it'll make the world easier for vendors so that they're not feeling put upon. And then just on our appendices, the data trust is, oh, sorry, Nick, I'm always time. Yeah, I think I'm gonna hit my time well, Nick. I've got about 90 seconds on my clock.
It's okay. You can take a few more minutes there. It's not a problem.
Okay, perfect. The data trust is a fundamental element to what we're doing. What we want to make sure is that the data is commercialized without being monopolized. This is a distinction. I think this was a problem. I mean, Google is a great company, but they're also a data company. We're not. We're a not-for-profit. The data that is contributed to the data trust will be securely and safely used, and it'll be for a common purpose as opposed to one member's advantage. We also want to make sure that the entities that can contribute the data will continue to own it. The data trust will be controlled in a transparent and fair manner. And we're also going to have an advisory committee to make sure we are always up to date with latest developments on privacy laws, privacy concerns. So we're always moving forward. And we also, in the way that any individual's data is put into the trust, the data will be de-identified or anonymized, and individuals will understand what the rules are for how their data is used, who's using it, and why. And they will also be able to control access to personal data and make a decision about whether or not they want to participate. Here's our emergency response. This is a really interesting technology, but amongst other things, it can make sure that first responders have understand who's who in the building, right down to identifying if there are X number of disabled people working in a particular office tower, so that they know where they are and they can deal with them when they arrive. We also think this is going to be the fundamental part of our resilience and adaptation product. By making any building smart, plus through the use of sensors, we can have an immediate win in terms of making buildings energy efficient right from the get-go. Unlike other applications, this application is easy to use. It can integrate different kinds of programs and operations, so it's user friendly and it can be used. And here are some of the advantages to reducing energy consumption and how it'll be done. We also are meeting high standards. We have a partnership with the CIO Strategy Council. Indeed, Keith Jansa is the chair of our board. He's the CEO he's the executive director of the Strategy Council. But we want to make sure that we are always abiding by the best standards and looking forward and being responsive to the concerns that individuals have and how data is being used.
Amazing.
Here are the last elements, but I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have going forward, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do this, Nick. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hugh. Great to hear about the work you're doing there, and similar to what we do at SNA as far as trying to get that innovation going. And I've been reading some articles recently about Canada kind of having a bit of an innovation boom. We're also getting some people from around the world that would generally land in California and the States, and now they're coming up here because of all the immigration rules down there. So I think that's combining with a lot of stuff going on here that's creating kind of a boom of innovation here in Canada. So that's great. I did have one person reach out to ask about your contact info, Hugh. So if you don't mind sharing that in chat, I'm sure an email would be fine. But that would be great, and then whoever needs to contact you can reach out there. So thanks again to Hugh O'Reilly from Innovate Cities. I did share a link there where you can check out their website. This really leads well into our next speaker, and I want to bring in Tonja Leach. And Tonja is the Executive Director at Quest Canada. She leads the organization to convene, educate, and influence governments, utilities, and energy providers, the development community, solution providers to advance Quest's visions of Canada as a nation of smart energy communities, exactly what we're talking about. She's been with Quest since its inception in 2007 and has played an instrumental role in establishing their extensive national network and ensuring Quest is known as in the industry as a leading thinker on the energy transition and the implementation of smart cities. So thanks again for being here, Tonja. Over to you to share your slides and let us know what you're up to at Quest.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here and get this into presentation mode. Okay, and while that's coming up, so yeah, thank you very much for the invitation, Nick. I've known of green drinks in Ottawa for a long time, but never really had an opportunity to participate. And now, ironically, usually the barrier was the fact that I'm often traveling around Canada, and I now have an opportunity to participate because I am home in Ottawa, but stuck at home and not able to actually join people in person. But that's our new world reality for now. Okay, so I'm going to come at this from perhaps a little bit of a different angle from what you've heard, but you'll hear some parallels. what Evelyne was saying in her opening comments, and also to Hugh, what Hugh was just talking about from a sort of technology perspective. So I'm going to just quickly this is what I'm going to walk you through to frame a little bit of the challenge that we're facing right now. The why on smart energy communities, why do they even matter? What are they? What is the pathway forward? And what are we doing to create some conditions for success? So framing the challenge. You're going to bring your minds back to pre-COVID. I feel like that seems like eons ago at this point in time, but I think that there was a lot of conversation in my world anyway around around the energy conversation in Canada. Most of the debate publicly was around the upstream and the supply side of the energy value chain, and that is obviously tied very heavily to the export economy that we have and have benefited from here in Canada for quite a long time. We were also seeing some conversations around the decarbonization of the power sector, but really the kind of piece of that has been missing in a lot of that conversation is that we only use 20% electricity in Canada, and that is already 80% clean. So decarbonizing that last remaining 20% is really not going to have a huge impact on what we've been trying to do in addressing the climate challenges that we face in Canada. The rest of the energy that is used in Canada, the other 80%, is more on that oil and gas side of things. And so there is still a huge challenge, even though we talk about the electrification, taking ourselves from 20% and kind of increasing that is not a small challenge. That is a massive expansion, and doing so is very challenging. So we were talking about it, and we were starting to see some action there, but only on a small slice of what the whole energy economy within Canada, the internal energy economy, is all about. There was very little attention being directed at the resource and industrial economy, and they are quite uniquely kind of predisposed to disruptions and cost. So again, that was kind of under the radar, not really on the docket as part of the conversation yet, but certainly would have been, sort of increasing in its need to be. And then even less so, although I think that those of you who actually work with municipalities or at municipalities may disagree, but if you look at the whole energy conversation in Canada, there was even less conversation actually happening about how we use energy in our communities, except, as I said here, within those communities themselves. There were some conversations happening, but on a kind of national scale, that really wasn't happening. And so we had been ignoring what is, quite honestly, one of the most effective avenues to actually have conversations, effective conversations on and civil dialogue on how we advance forward on both our economic, energy, and environmental agendas. So I'm just going to define community for you. A lot of people's minds often jump just to municipalities when we talk about about community, but we see that as a kind of a broader definition than that. So yes, it's a geographic and a political entity, which is an essential foundation for actually having effective policy to move us forward. It can be, as it's small communities, medium communities, large communities, rural, remote, Indigenous. We have a very large archetype of communities in Canada, and they can be, as it says here, like that, the legal component of that, or a broader definition. These communities are supported by a multitude of different stakeholders. Think about the energy utilities, the energy service providers, the builders, the developers, those that run the transportation systems, the water systems, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an incredible number of stakeholders that make up a community. And as Evelyne was talking about the complexity, this is just one element of that complexity that we have to be working within if we're going to make some advancements. So a community is the very fabric of the society that we live in, and we're trying to drive change and change that fabric of who we are and what we do. So why do communities matter? 60% of the energy that you use in Canada comes from our communities, and that represents 50% of the emissions. So that simple statement right there tells you why we have to not just focus on the export economy, not just focus on decarbonization of the power sector, but actually take a more holistic approach and look at it from the local level, and perhaps even, as my chair of my board likes to say, the opposite end of the telescope, right? We often in Canada have looked at it from a supply first perspective, and we might actually need to be looking at it from the other end of that telescope. This comes with some good and bad news. The fact that this amount of energy is used in our communities and also represents some emissions. The good is that there are many opportunities to be much smarter about how we use energy in our communities. So in order of priority of efficacy, I think it's well known, no doubt in this room and many other rooms, that the International Energy Agency has called efficiency the first fuel, and we absolutely agree with that. So improving efficiency from individual buildings, equipment, to whole subsystems, neighborhoods, building complexes, transportation systems, absolutely has to be first and foremost the first opportunity that is looked to be taken advantage of. Optimize exergy, and yes, exergy is a word I think that's not familiar to a lot of people, and often people think that this is the typo on my slide. So a simplified definition of exergy is just using the right energy in the most appropriate application for its properties. Every time we shift between energy forms, we lose energy. Think of power to gas, green hydrogen, or gas to power to heat, versus gas directly being converted to heat. So the more times we shift between those differing properties, we lose energy. So we're reducing the efficiency of the system. So doesn't mean that we shouldn't do that, but we have to think about that before we actually execute. We obviously exhaust a lot of heat, especially in a cold climate like Canada. So we need to be capturing all of that feasible thermal energy and using it rather than just exhausting it into our atmosphere. We need to be, and kind of similarly along that same vein about reducing waste, is we need to be using those available resources, such as landfill gas, municipal, agriculture, industrial, and forestry waste as energy inputs. So that's number 4. Then we must look at where the opportunities lie for renewable energy resources. And for those of you who are in the kind of energy world, we talk about efficiency and we talk about renewables, but we don't talk about these other opportunities in the middle very often. So I don't think anybody needs to have examples of this, but tapping into those local opportunities, whether they be geothermal systems, small scale hydro, biomass, biosolar, solar, wind, biogas, solar, wind energy, small scale nuclear, all of those kind of opportunities before us. And then we also need to think about how the grid infrastructure, there's multiple grids, right, not just one, how the grids can support what we're trying to do in tying all of this together. And this is where the technology piece comes into it from our perspective. The technological solutions is what enables the integration of these systems and the data that we need in order to make educated decisions about what move we should make next. So the bad part about all of this, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, right? It would be nice to just say, here's the appropriate solution, cookie cutter it, off you go, that's all you need to do. Every community has unique attributes, and their solutions will be a unique combination and integration of the opportunities for them to be smart. The Smart Energy Community Solution. So what is a smart energy community? As we forge ahead with our green economic recovery, we must not forget that as Canadians, while we want, generally speaking, to reduce our emissions and reduce our environmental impact, we have high expectations of our energy systems. They must be, first and foremost, safe, secure, reliable, resilient, affordable. And they must meet several other expectations regarding environmental and social impacts as well. Greenhouse gas emissions, as much as many of us would like them to be highest on the priority list, for most Canadians is not. So now we're talking about the green economic recovery as we're hopefully coming out of the COVID situation that we've been in. And And that recovery really needs to be founded on these foundational facts that what matters to Canadians, that the greenhouse gas emission piece of it might not be the highest priority. This doesn't mean that transforming the greenhouse gas emission profile of our society and economy is impossible. It just requires serious people willing to do serious things to actually make it happen. So smart energy communities enable serious people to do serious things to get us the outcomes we're looking for. Smart communities understand the compelling challenge of climate change. They recognize the realities of the energy system that serves them and the priorities. It integrates local, renewable, and conventional energy sources, making sure we're maximizing, for instance, the value of the infrastructure assets we've already invested in. We don't want to cut ourselves off, to kind of digress a little bit here, we don't want to cut ourselves off to pipeline infrastructure if pipeline infrastructure could serve us well in the future. One example, and I'm not going to say that this should have been done, but one example to really hit this home for those of you who are my age or older, I remember pulling into car parking lots where you could plug in your block heater at any parking spot within a parking lot. If we had that infrastructure today, we would be having a very different electric vehicle conversation than we are having. So we have had infrastructure, and then we have deemed it to not be valuable to us anymore, allowed it to wane, and then realized that it actually could have served us. So that's just one example. Should we have maintained that infrastructure until electric vehicles really got in play? Probably not. But we also need to understand that we have made huge investments in infrastructure to date, and we need to make sure that we are giving all of those the best opportunity to serve us in a low emission future. So I'm a little off script here. Okay, so and most importantly, I think that a smart energy community is one that understands and recognizes that they need to efficiently, cleanly, safely, and affordably meet their energy needs. Right? It can't just be greenhouse gas emission reductions without understanding and appreciating the impact of cost. So smart energy communities are an essential foundation for effective energy and climate policy. So it's a little bit repetitive. So really what this is talking about is that, we need smart energy communities because it actually leverages what matters most to Canadians. Those economic opportunities, environmental quality, sustainability, resilience, affordability. And they should be used as entry points to rational conversations about energy and climate. A good example of this is there's some communities, Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, for instance. I heard someone from Truro was on the line. Not too far from Bridgewater, but Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, where one of their biggest issues in their community is energy poverty. People cannot afford to pay for the energy that they need in order to run their day-to-day lives. So this should be used, and is being used, thankfully, in Bridgewater as an entry point to a conversation about energy and about climate, and looking for the multiple outcomes and multiple benefits that can be derived from taking a more smart approach to energy use within the community. So what is our pathway forward? Just share with you some principles for effective energy and climate policy. I've already touched on number 3 about maximizing the value of our infrastructure assets. Our climate policy to date has not been built on a foundation of sound energy policy. We have been building climate policy with the sole objective of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, not understanding that we need to accomplish multiple outcomes, and also understanding how energy serves us today and how we want energy to serve us tomorrow. We've heard lots about technology, and I think Hugh hit on this as well. We need to encourage technological change and create an environment that enables that without being deterministic about technology. If we are deterministic, we are leaving out opportunity for other technologies to serve us in the future. I've already talked about maximizing the value of our infrastructure assets, both existing assets and new. We have to emphasize institutional innovation. I think, Evelyne, you were talking about governance and the need for governance, new governance models. This is absolutely imperative if we're actually going to make some progress. And, our institutional, the institutions within Canada have not been very innovative. And I think that we need to start thinking a bit more creatively and innovatively about how they can be structured in a way that serves us better in the future. We know that policy uncertainty has caused a lot of challenge. I think it's, this is one I think is maybe too far down the list here, but if we do not get the policy environment right, the impact on Canada is going to be significant, not just in allowing us to do what we want to do, but being able to draw investment back to Canada. We've lost a lot of investment opportunities, and a lot of it is because we have a very uncertain policy environment. We need to build that certainty in order to enable investment back into Canada. And we also need to restore our trust and our confidence in our decision-making institutions. A lot of the debate that has happened around energy specifically has eroded trust and confidence. I think COVID, ironically perhaps, has maybe turned that corner a little bit, maybe the federal government. I think there's some people who obviously would have liked them to do more and others that would have liked them to spend less. But no matter where you think, what you think about Justin Trudeau, I think that there's been a bit of a restoring in that, like, the government does have our back. And so the trust level maybe has ticked up a little bit. We'll see if they can maintain it and even push it even further, but that may take another government to move that needle. So smart energy communities are an enabler to a constructive, sustainable energy future. They better position Canada in international discussions and for investment opportunities, and they encourage constructive debate. So let's talk about how we create the conditions for success. A lot of what I'm hearing, I'm not sure if this is consistent for everybody else on the line, but a lot of what I'm hearing, especially as we sort of hear the dialogue and discussion about building back better and stimulus funding, is a very quick jump to incentives and just putting more money on the table as kind of critical to us being able to be successful with the economic recovery and also the green agenda or the net zero by 2050 agenda. I argue that that's not the case. Yes, some incentives are needed. I'm not going to say that we shouldn't put incentives in place for things like building retrofits and EV infrastructure. But if we don't address the barriers that were there prior to COVID, we're going to spend a lot of money and continue to make, marginal progress. If we really want to kind of jump onto a new set of tracks, we have to deal with the competing policy that happens across various levels of government, outdated legislation. We have to deal with regulatory barriers that don't allow for innovation to really take place. And we also have to deal with a multitude of differing opinions on which pathway is actually the best pathway to the future that we're looking for. So I've outlined, I'm not going to go through them, but there's a number of things here that kind of indicate what I call the foundations of our society that need to be addressed if we are actually going to make progress to having smart cities in Canada and dealing with the challenges that we face from both an economic, energy, and environment perspective. So a little plug for Quest, because I haven't said anything about Quest. So we're a national nonprofit organization located in Canada, been around for 13 years. We primarily do three things. We are doing a lot of that work that's creating those conditions, but we do it through connecting, influencing, and educating. So we offer a number of products and services, and the connecting piece is really about peer learning, and not just peer-to-peer, but peer to other sector peer as well, right? So how are we building understanding between different sectors so that they are able to understand who has what levers to pull and when they need to be pulled? How do we work together as an ecosystem to drive change versus just working in our silos? We're a very siloed society, I think, as everybody would probably appreciate. We do a lot of work to influence decision makers to set policy and take actions that are advancing smart energy communities. We run a number, we don't stream this up, we're an independent third-party organization, we don't stream this up all on our own. We do leverage the network of over 5,000 businesses across Canada that are part of our network in order to draw the knowledge that's needed in order to put those policy recommendations forward. But unlike an association, we don't have a member base. And then lastly, we develop a lot of knowledge and solutions to help accelerate the implementation of smart energy communities across Canada. Most of that is is more kind of applied research, but because of our unique perspective on Canada, where we see the sort of national, we're national, but we're local. So that's one element that makes us a little bit unique. And we also come at this, as I've been describing, from an energy perspective versus a climate perspective. So a couple of things that make us pretty unique. And what that does for us is it highlights and enables us to see where there's gaps in knowledge or tools that are needed in order to enable the energy transformation that we're trying to see happen in Canada. So how do we do that? So there's a couple things on here on the slides. The first two I've roughly mentioned already. To deal with the challenge of regulation and innovation, which are, kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Regulation provides us with safety, affordability, security, reliability, all those needed things in our energy system, but isn't really an environment where it enables innovation. So there is something called sandboxes. Some of you may be familiar with them. Originally designed and implemented in the financial sector, and we're looking at how do we take kind of the best practices of innovation sandboxes and bring them to a regulatory environment. So that's a piece of work that we have on the go right now. It's pretty early in that, but we've just recently released the first report, which is kind of like looking at it from an international perspective and what are the international best practices on sandboxes. And then, of course, the next step is how do we interpret those for a Canadian context. And then we're going to be working jurisdiction by jurisdiction and workshopping the development of regulatory innovation sandbox frameworks across Canada. The next piece, we talked about renewable energy. Some of the challenges that the renewable energy space faces right now is, especially at the grid scale versus the individual homeowner scale, is that there's obviously regulatory challenges that they face, but if you're able to get through the regulatory challenges, there is not an ecosystem yet that is bringing together all the stakeholders that need to come together at the front end to enable the grid scale renewable energy to actually be deployed at the back end. I mean, Ontario, most of us are in Ontario, is a great example of that, right? We've tried to do grid scale wind turbines, we've tried to do grid scale solar historically and ran into a lot of challenges and a lot of cost as a result of that. So this accelerating implementation of renewable energy brings all the appropriate stakeholders together at the front end, understands the risks and the rewards and who needs what before one actually goes down the road of finding if you can, find the regulatory construct and build the regulatory construct to enable grid scale renewable energy to take place so you don't run into issues at the back end. There's some examples in Alberta where they've attempted to do this. They've spent 2 years going through regulatory processes, et cetera. Finally got to the green light, then going to the local community and said, okay, we're here, we're ready, we're going to install this grid scale solar. And they said, no, you're not. So we need to eliminate, if we're really going to accelerate, we need to eliminate some of those sort of missteps, I guess, in deployment and implementation. We also do some work around energy resilience. And again, it's all about, for us, it's all about that connecting and convening and partnering. So bringing together multiple different stakeholders from different sectors to help them move forward together on energy resilience. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the Smart Energy Communities Benchmark for a moment. This is a tool that we developed over the last couple of years, and it is has 10 key performance indicators and numerous almost 100 different measures underneath that help communities, different municipalities, back to my earlier slide, understand how they are progressing on becoming smart about energy. So this is the importance of measurement and being able to constantly measure one's progress and understand where one needs to focus one's efforts in order to make progress. So that's the intent of the benchmark tool. It was piloted through again, kind of all those different community archetypes, small, medium, large, rural, and remote. And now we have another project that is looking at it for Indigenous communities, recognizing that they are fundamentally different than our traditional community infrastructures in Canada.
That's fantastic, Tonja. You guys are up to some great work there.
Yes, we are. I just wanted to leave with the where to next, Nick, so give me 1 second. I think, you know, it's an exciting time. I think if we've learned anything from COVID, we should learn that if we come together, we can be very successful. I think, you know, maybe that's not the case in the US, but it certainly is the case here in Canada, and I think we should all be very proud of that. But we should apply that to sort of everything else we do. And so we've got a lot of hard work in front of us to actually push this transformation forward. But I'm quite hopeful, I guess, or see this very positively, that we have something right in front of us that can actually be a catalyst and help us move forward.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tonja. Great presentation, very timely. And definitely we'll, as we move forward with our Green Drinks editions, we'll be hoping to focus a little bit more on some of that green recovery and what that might look like. And glad you were able to finally join us on Green Drinks. And, you know, sometimes these virtual sessions make it a little bit easier. So appreciate the work you're doing. And it's great to see. And you know, hopefully we start getting a bit of competition between the cities, because I know that's something that can spur some innovation and some growth as well. You know, when you get kind of the Ottawa versus Montreal versus Halifax versus BC, Edmonton. And I think our next speaker is great to talk a little bit about that. So we'll thank Tonja, and then we'll bring in Alain Miguelez. And Alain works for the City of Ottawa. He's the manager of planning, policy, and resiliency over there. And he oversees the preparation of the city's official plan and community plans, the city's climate change master plan, and manages the research and forecasting and energy evolution portfolios. So he's up to quite a lot of work. He's going to share us about a bit more about what's going on here in Ottawa. I know we've got a few Ottawa people and a bit more of a different crowd. And then after, we'll kind of go into a bit more of a general discussion. If you do have any questions, particularly for each panelist, just go ahead and ask them in chat. And then at the end, we'll keep it a bit more of an informal discussion. So I want to bring in Alain, and he can share his screen and talk about all the good stuff going on in City of Ottawa and how we're hopefully leading the way with some things.
Thanks very much, Nick and Raymond, for the invitation. And I also want to thank Tonja, Evelyne, and Hugh for setting up the discussion so nicely. I've been taking notes through the presentations, and there's obviously quite a bit that we can talk about. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the presentation that I have for you. But just by way of introduction, as Nick mentioned, I work for the City of Ottawa, which is a very large municipality, both in geography and in population. We're the 4th biggest city in Canada by population. We passed 1 million people last year. And with our sister city, Gatineau, and the surrounding municipalities in Ontario and Quebec, we're now in the metro area between 1.5 and 1.6 million people. So we're, just to put it in context, we're about the size Vancouver was when they hosted Expo 86. We're the size Toronto was when they opened their subway. So we're at that level now where we need to tackle a number of big city questions. And we're tackling these questions in the midst of a series of crises, one, of course, being the climate crisis, of course, the COVID crisis, a housing crisis. So our city council has declared a housing emergency. And we're also, as I said, a very large municipality by geography. We're about 40% the size of PEI. So it's a very, very large territory. And some of the work that we've been doing has involved thinking about our future, mostly because, you know, we hit a few milestones last year. We've hit about 20 years since amalgamation. We used to be in a series of different municipalities. And again, this is an advantage that we have perhaps in comparison with other large metro areas. I know that in the Montreal region, there's the City of Montreal, and there's Laval, and there's South Shore, North Shore, and there's, you know, literally dozens of different municipalities. In the Greater Toronto area, there's the City of Toronto and the 5 GTA regions. up to Hamilton and Waterloo and everything. And there's a number of different municipalities, and the Vancouver area is the same thing. We're a bit of an anomaly in Ottawa because we have the City of Ottawa, the City of Gatineau, and those two cities basically are 80% of the metro population. Then you have no more than a dozen municipalities that surround us. So the two large central cities of Ottawa and Gatineau really are the core, and between these two municipal entities, and this is just to pick up on what Tonja and Evelyne were alluding to with respect to the governance and the stakeholders that are involved in key decisions. We have found that being an amalgamated city has really taken away all the cobwebs of interjurisdictional discussion, all the layers that used to exist. And we can just talk one-on-one between us and Gatineau. There's the NCC as part of the picture. They're always good to deal with, but I mean, basically there's two large municipalities. The other thing that we've been doing is, we've been thinking about the future, and thinking about the future, I mean, a lot of cities, when they do a plan, they start with a vision. They think, okay, well, this is a vision of the future. This is where we want to go. And we want it to be a little more realistic than that. It's good to have visions, but they have a way of being knocked out of bounds by things like COVID, by things like unexpected crises. And so instead of having a vision, we did a whole analysis of scenarios. What are the likely scenarios, whether we like them or not? What do we have to deal with? What do we have to prepare for? What do we need to be ready for so that we can be a resilient city? What do we need to, like we've been pretty good in environment, but that's not good enough if climate change means that our pipes are not going to be large enough to handle all the rainwater that's coming down. That's one of hundreds of examples. So we have deployed that sort of leadership in saying, rather than just focus on a vision, those are always useful, but what are the scenarios that we need to be prepared for, whether we like them or not? And then we thought, of course, of, how many people are we planning for? And this is, again, when we're thinking of a city, one of the mistakes that was done in Ottawa in the 20th century is to think of Ottawa as a small town. We had a plan done by the federal government in 1950 that said, Ottawa will never be bigger than 500,000. Bada boom, bada bing, that's it, right? So basically, we are living with the legacy of planning that baked in a number of things, anticipating that we would never be bigger than 500,000 people. And of course, we tore through that population threshold not later than 15 or 20 years after that plan. And we're now, like I said, triple that. It's impossible to think of a city as a finished product. Impossible. Cities always change. You can't keep people from moving to a city, especially a city that has opportunity and good quality of life. And in Canada, we have a lot of quality of life. Not only Ottawa, all of the big cities in Canada, if you compare us to the global picture, are very livable cities. We're planning for, and this is another difference. We're planning for public health and climate. So I'll talk about climate, but public health, if you think of urban planning in the 19th century, urban planning was created as a discipline to address health conditions. People were getting sick out of dirty water. They were dealing with cities that industrialized very quickly. A lot of people moved very quickly from the countryside to the cities to go work in factories, and all the pollution was being spewed into the water, and people were drinking that water and they were getting sick. So urban planning was all about, back then, making sure that people don't get sick out of living in cities. That's how we got sanitation, drinking water, and all the zoning that started to put factories away from where people were living. So what are the health crises that we're facing today? Well, aside from COVID, we are facing a health crisis that comes from our sedentary lifestyles. People don't walk anymore. So there's diabetes, there's obesity, there's isolation, and there's the conditions like depression that are linked with isolation because our cities have sprawled so much. And anything you need to do that involves taking the car and road raging down the highway to some mall and being isolated inside of a box when you're driving a car. We were talking about technology, and I know we all have a lot of excitement about electric cars, but we really need to think about it. I mean, electric cars can be as clean as you want, but if it still means that we're stuck in traffic and having to cover long distances to go to isolated pods of things, have we really solved the entirety of the problem? We've solved one problem, but not the entirety of the problem. So we're planning for, obviously, a city is people. We're planning for people. We're planning for a population of 1.4 million in 2046. By then, Ottawa-Gatineau will be about 2 million people. But obviously, we know that things don't stop there. We want to also leave the city to the people who will be doing our jobs after we're gone, with enough thinking to allow the city to also grow comfortably to the 2 to 3 million range. So by 2100, we very likely will hit a 2 to 3 million population range here in Ottawa. And what do we need to be thinking about? What do we need to put in place? What do we need to think in terms of advanced preparation for the city to comfortably reach, livably reach 3 million people? So what we're putting in our official plan, and I'm not going to do justice to this because there's a lot of material, and a lot of it is available through our consultation portal. So if you go ottawa.ca/new OP for official plan, you'll see a lot of the material that we've shared with people and a lot of what we've been consulting on. But when we think of how the city can grow to be resilient, to be sustainable, what we said to the population was, let's start with the big ideas. We call them the 5 big moves. What are the big ideas out of which all policy must flow? And so the first one, and this, by the way, is adopted by council, and it was a big victory for us to have council adopt this, because it puts in place the foundations on which we're going to build our plan for the next quarter century. The first thing we want to do is that we want to grow not by spreading out anymore. We want to consolidate what we have. And we call this intensification. So we want to intensify the city. Rather than continuing to add farmland and making new suburbs, we want to grow by intensification. Again, we're lucky because we have under a single municipal jurisdiction all of our downtown, all of our urban, all of our suburbs, and all of our rural belt. So we're able to control under a single official plan all the totality of the contexts, from the very rural to the very urban. And so we have now as an objective the most aggressive, the most ambitious intensification target in Canada. We want 60% of new residents to be in existing neighborhoods. And the minority will be in suburban communities, new neighborhoods. We want to grow the city around the higher order transit network. So again, we want to build a city of proximity, not a city of distance. When we look at the challenges that climate change has made us realize, the fact that people are forced to drive means that we are choking in pollution and we're choking in traffic. So yes, we can clean up the pollution with electric cars, but we also want to clean up the traffic and the loss of time, the loss of mental health that comes with just the time lost in traffic. So we just opened a metro in Ottawa. You can, Evelyne, you can come down and we can show you the Ottawa Metro. We have 2 lines with 18 stations, and we're under construction to add 24 stations in lines 1 and 2. But by 2046, between the metro and the transitway, the bus transitway, we will have a network of 7 lines and 142 stations. That's a completely different architecture of movement in the city. And so we want to grow the city around the stations and around the corridors. We want to embed housing and transportation affordability. We think affordability is one of our key advantages. And then we want to build on, or move towards, or build from scratch. We want a city on 15-minute neighborhoods. And this is one of the things that I like to tease people about. What do Ottawa and Paris have in common? Well, we're both national capitals and we're both beautiful cities in our own way, but we're both, and this is interesting, both Ottawa and Paris are talking about the future on the basis of 15-minute neighborhoods. We want the city to be neighborhoods where everything you need is within a 15-minute walk of your home. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to own a car. It's a free country. People can do what they want, but to give people the option, not the obligation to drive, but the option, and the option to have what they need around them in their neighborhood, I think is key. So this is the map of our transit system the way it will be. So red is rail and blue is bus. Bus is the bus rapid transit. It's like a metro bus. It doesn't stop at red lights. It only stops at stations and it just flies down. And you can see also that we're connecting to the City of Gatineau. The City of Gatineau is actually working on their own tram system, which they are going to be bringing into Ottawa, and we're in the middle of discussions about how that's going to look. So I mentioned affordability. Again, affordability allows us to do a lot of different things. But if you think of building, how we build, building efficiency, building heating, building cooling, one of the things that we're noticing is a city of detached homes, bungalows or single family homes, automatically is more spread out, but automatically also costs more to heat and to cool because it's a house with 4 exterior walls. If you think of the wonderful Montreal triplexes, or those beautiful streets in Montreal where you don't notice it, but there's no gaps between buildings and everybody still has their privacy. Everything's still, the streets still have trees. There's still a lot of character to those streets. But, there's only 2 exterior walls. And by being side by side, the gains in efficiency in heating and cooling are tremendous. And we see this in our 19th century neighborhoods here in Ottawa. So we've been working with architects and designing what we call 613 flats. It'll be our version of the triplex. It's not necessarily going to be a 3-unit, it could be more, but 613 flats are our response to the housing challenge. We want housing that by building is more efficient, but also gives more opportunities for people to live in existing neighborhoods, so that when a house is torn down, what should replace it is more than one. It should be many houses in buildings that can start to form the frontage of a block that looks more urban, feels more urban, still keeps privacy, but is more efficient in terms of using space and in terms of energy efficiency. So look for 613 flats. There's a whole really interesting package of the kinds of housing that we're going to suggest should be built. And basically what we're doing, and we've said this to our home building industry, is let's work together to see how, typically the home building industry likes to sell to first-time buyers, families that are about to start having kids and all the rest of it. How can we target a market of families, of couples that want to start to have kids, and instead of sending them to the suburbs, take them and bring them into existing neighborhoods? What do you sell to them? What kind of design of house do you sell to them? They don't necessarily want to be in an elevator building. They want a door on the ground. They want a little patch of grass outside for the kids to go out and play, a courtyard. How should that look? So we're doing all that work. In terms of mobility, one of the, so our second big move is that by 2046, we want the majority of trips in Ottawa to be by sustainable mode share, which means transit, walking, and biking. So more than 50%. It's a very ambitious goal. And again, because we're such a large city, we're not going to hit the same target in every part of the city, but we have to understand that in certain parts of the city, it's already happening. In other parts of the city, we just need to nudge the right conditions along a little more to make it happen. In the rural area, it's not going to happen, but that's where your electric cars and that sort of mobility solution can come in. Our new transportation master plan is going to build on the metro and the approved lines of Metrobus, the transitway, but we basically are positioning transit as the basis for urban growth. Now, obviously, through the COVID crisis, there's a lot of people who have become apprehensive of taking transit. Our statistics and working with health, Ottawa Public Health, suggest that there's no more or less correlation between transit or any other public place in terms of transmission, really, and the same goes for urban density. There's no correlation between urban density and rates of transmission. It really becomes a matter of, the personal protective equipment that people wear, the physical distancing that's required, and the washing of hands and sanitizing surfaces, which OC Transpo is doing. But once physical distancing is a thing of the past, and it will be eventually, and people are feeling good about being in a crowded train, in a crowded restaurant, in a crowded bar, on a crowded sidewalk, just the way it used to be. That's the real essence of city life, if you think about it. A city is about people, it's about public place, it's about public realm, it's about being in a street when the sun comes down and you see that there's a river of people walking up and down, going to different things, theaters, restaurants, bars, little stores, going home, going to a night shift. That's the essence of a city, and we don't think that that's ever going to be lost, and we don't want to lose it. So the way that people move around sustainably really becomes an important piece of this. We're going to be the first city in Canada that organizes its urban plan based on what we call the transect, so a continuum between rural and urban. You start with the countryside and nature, and then you move up to, you know, suburb, and here we have the greenbelt, into outer urban and inner urban, and then downtown. And each of those will have their own policy objectives, their own goals, based on understanding where each of these contexts is at in terms of their evolution, how advanced they are, how they lag behind, where they lag behind, and what they really need. So just, and I'll go through this quickly, there's examples of where we want to position policy objectives for the downtown core. We want to grow the downtown. We're growing the downtown towards the west. We want to improve urban design and architecture. We want to strengthen it as a major destination, and improve as a good place to live. Downtown should not be all about office towers. The first inner belt of urban neighborhoods, this is where we see the most viable examples of real 15-minute neighborhoods that are really in demand. People love 15-minute neighborhoods. Nick, you know this, I think you live in one, a lot of people do as well. And the fact is we need to build more of them. So where do you build more of them? And really the answer that we're proposing is that you build out from the center. And you build out, taking the avenues that radiate out from the center, and you build around these avenues, and you build around the transit where you have stations. In the outer urban, that's a little farther out, it's the 1980s, 90s bungalow belt, if you will. They're too new to change quickly, so we have to recognize that and act on whatever opportunities will exist and pursue intensification opportunities. But really the challenge there is to start to diversify them. And in the suburbs, again, most of them are, 1990s, 2000, 2010. They're very new. They are car oriented for now. They still have the big box stores. They still function along that logic. So they're too new for the buildings to be replaced. We have to acknowledge that and manage that stability, but we can start to diversify them as well by attracting jobs. That's the one thing that they don't have. Orleans is the size of Moncton. Barhaven is bigger than Kingston. And those two big suburban communities really don't have that many jobs when you think about it. So we need to start to pump them up with jobs. And then all the new suburbs where there's empty land now, we want to provide a policy package that ensures that they really get built like true 15-minute neighborhoods. They need main streets, they need their minor corridors, they need their local hubs, they need their corner stores, their little local restaurants and bars and stores that people can walk to, instead of being just cookie cutter subdivisions that people have to drive out of and into and have nothing else around. Really, we're dealing with the legacy of 20th century planning that decided that everything had to be split and separated in space. The house is all in one side, the jobs in another, the stores in another, and everything is separate in space. And, I think it was Evelyne, or I'm not sure if it was Evelyne, but somebody talked about technological determinism. The 20th century did that. We baked our cities with the technological determinism of automobiles. We adopted that technology, but we more than adopted, we planned everything around it. And now we're stuck with it. How do we unstuck ourselves from that? It doesn't mean eliminating them, but it means how do we rethink of the city as being a city of options, not a city of obligation to do just one thing. And really the automobile is a rural tool. It was invented for the rural area. It was brought into cities to sell more of them, but it was invented for the rural area. A car goes faster than a horse. And when you need to bring apples to the market, well, you want to get there fast. I just want to close with a couple of thoughts. Economic development, Nick threw the challenge. How can we be a good competitive city? Ottawa's always thought of itself as the little cousin between Toronto and Montreal. The two bigger cities are always shining bright and everything. And we love them, and they've done wonderful things, and we have close relationships with both of them. But we're big enough now to start to think of ourselves as the middle of the mega region of Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. Between the three of us, we're 15 million people. We're the biggest mega region in Canada. And we in Ottawa are in the middle. Ottawa-Gatineau is the middle of this. how do we think of ourselves as positioned in this middle of this mega region? And how do we work with our friends in Montreal and Toronto to start to think of this mega region as a global entity that can be competitive, so that, again, to Hugh's point, we can scale up better, we can incubate better, we can radiate better globally with our technology and with our ideas. And it's all happening in urban areas. We see that the Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal mega region is the prime one in Canada to be the source of most of the innovation in the country. So we're going to be rethinking a number of initiatives with respect to incubation, but we're probably going to have one of the most liberal official plans in Canada with respect to small business incubation, micro retail, micro maker space. We're starting an initiative on the nightlife economy. So we've got a number of things that you would be surprised Ottawa can do, and it's about time that we do them, quite frankly. On energy and climate, this is a topic all on its own. Our previous speakers have covered it very competently. I just want to touch on a couple of key things. City Council adopted, and this is again being done in my branch, the Climate Change Master Plan. So Ottawa has a climate change master plan that says that we should reduce our emissions by 100% by 2050. So complete elimination of greenhouse gas emissions. We're embedding this in our growth management strategy. We're embedding it in the development standards that will go into building, how you build buildings. So on this, we're working with our partners in the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. And we've got a lot of discussions because from their perspective, these things need to get put into the building code so that we create a level playing field that everybody has to play by, and it's absolutely fair, and they're right. But our role as a municipality is to research and advocate to the provincial government to make sure that the building code is catching up with technology and is catching up with what we need to do. There were two big energy shifts in the 20th century. We went from coal to fuel oil, and then from fuel oil to natural gas. Okay, so we know it's possible. What we need to go through in the 21st century is to go from natural gas to non-combustibles. That's the shift we have to make. So clean energy is part and parcel of something we're just about to bring to Environment Committee called the Energy Evolution Strategy for the City of Ottawa. It's huge, and it recognizes that the city itself cannot do it alone. We need help from our partners in provincial and federal governments. We need help from civil society, from the home building industry, and from all the stakeholders, institutional and other, that are at work building buildings and consuming energy. This is a community discussion that we're very interested in having, and there is another link that we can share later about some of the information that we've prepared. We see ourselves, because we're the nation's capital, as having almost an obligation of leadership in this. You know, as the nation's capital, we should be able to be sort of the window that Canada shows to the world as, you know, this is how it should look in the mind of Canada to be in a city in the 21st century, to be in an energy efficient city in the 21st century. And then we have a whole bunch of implementation instruments that I won't delve on right now, but I can answer questions. Just to let you know as well, we've had really tremendous success in talking to people. Our public consultation, just, you know, these are numbers before COVID, and I think they got updated. We reached about 45,000 people through consultation. We were out 73 times before COVID in neighborhood associations, community centers, talking to Indigenous groups, stakeholder groups. We have an ambassadors group of underrepresented people. And we've got an ongoing program of engagement activities. So please talk to us. There's, you know, through the official plan portal, there's a number of things that you can access in terms of information. And we always have a survey going on with to ask for people's opinion. So I know it's getting late. I'll stop here in case there's questions. I just want to thank you guys again for the invitation. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alain. So fantastic to hear about all the great initiatives that are going on at the local level. And, you know, one of the reasons that I love Ottawa so much, and people always ask me, why do you live in Ottawa? I say to them, well, you know, I can get anywhere in 20 minutes. And it kind of echoes that 15-minute neighborhood. Of course, not necessarily maybe at 4:30 or 5 o'clock if I'm trying to skid across the Queensway, but it's definitely a great city. I enjoy, riding my bike as much as possible from sort of April to November, trying to, stay off the roads and things like that. And fabulous to hear about all the good work going on. And I'm sure that will spur a bit of a discussion. So before we get into the discussion, I want to say a big thank you to all the speakers. I want to say
Sorry, I want to correct myself. It was Tonja who talked about technological determinism. My apologies.
Great. So that may be a good jumping off point for some discussions. So just want to say a big thank you to all the speakers. Big thank you to Evelyne, to Hugh, to Tonja, to Alain, to my colleague Raymond for the assistance here. We'll put a bit of a pause on the YouTube recording so we can get that out to the masses. But do feel free to stick around. You can turn your camera on. We'll unmute everybody. And so if you jump in, if you have any specific questions, jump in. We'll kind of keep it a bit more discussion based. But once again, thank you all so much for coming for another edition of Green Drinks. We're cooking up some good ones for October and November. We're going to be focusing on how to heat and cool your home more renewably next month. So stay tuned for that one. There'll be some great nuggets about what you can do to stay warm and stay cool more sustainably, which is becoming more and more important as we fluctuate between the temperatures. And over to Raymond for any last comments before we open it up for discussion.
No, I think these are great, great presentations, and I think Nick will be contacting a few of the organizations. I think there's great synergies between SmartNet Alliance and Innovate Cities and Quest, that's for sure. And we're always in contact with the City of Ottawa, so that's great with NA. And Evelyne was quite interesting, so we'll see where we can take that. Again, thank you for coming, and I'm just going to stop the recording, and then we're going to move into the question period, and we can take it from there. So we'll see you next month.
All right, so everybody's unmuted now.